everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started this afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, What's New in Oracle 18c and 19c. To begin, I'd like to quickly introduce Viscosity and our speaker today. So Viscosity, we are a solution-based consulting company. We specialize in data management-based technologies. We're also an Oracle Platinum partner. We now have 5 Oracle ACE directors with us, one of which is Jim Czuprynski, who I'll introduce in a moment. We published more than 23 books in the Oracle space, ranging from performance tuning to Oracle Cloud. We have 3 focus pillars: applications and infrastructure. In the application space, we run the full stack, EBS, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, as well as SaaS to PaaS integration. Data, we focus on everything from database to data integration, analytics. Finally, our focus in infrastructure ranges from public cloud, private cloud, to engineered systems. And then this is a brief portfolio of what we do within those 3 pillars. Everything from zero downtime migrations, license management, assessments, to turnkey projects. And here is our speaker for today, Jim Czuprynski. He just joined Viscosity as a senior data architect. And like I mentioned earlier, Jim, he's an Oracle ACE director. He's got more than 4 decades of IT experience, serving different roles at several Fortune 1000 companies. He's co-authored 4 books and even has a blog. It's called Generally It Depends. It contains his thoughts on all things Oracle. He's also an amazing speaker and a regular throughout Oracle user groups in North America. His most recent was IOUG and Collaborate in San Antonio. And his next up is in Chicago. And I will hand it over to Jim.
Okay, good. But all right, let's get started. My name's Jim Czuprynski. I'm a senior enterprise data architect for Viscosity. I don't have a lot to tell you about myself, except that I'm one of 6 Oracle ACEs, 5 ACE directors on the Viscosity team. And I speak at a lot of conferences. I was at Collaborate last week. I've written dozens, if not hundreds of articles. And as I mentioned, I've co-authored 4 books. Enough about me. You're not here to hear about me today. What you're here to hear about today is why 18c and 19c, and for a little bit, let's talk a little bit about 12c and what the whole point of our discussion is. I talk to a lot of DBAs at conferences. I still hear a lot of them running on 11.204. If they have databases hosted offshore, it's even worse. But most folks are probably on at least 11.2.4 at this point. If you haven't upgraded to 12c R1 or even 12c R2 yet, it's time. There may be demands from your management. There may be demands from your applications developers. And in fact, there may be demands from your competitors because they're using features that you haven't had a chance to use yet because you're still on 11GR2. And 11GR2 has been around in its initial format, 11.201, since September of 2009. Last time I checked, that's 10 years almost. We're coming up into 10 years in September. And just because 10 years has elapsed isn't a good reason. There's an excellent reason, especially that bottom bullet point. December 31st, 2020 is the final extended support date. And I love that line, but then at the usual extra cost. How much is that? How much do you have? Oracle will find a way to charge you for every bug fix for 11.204 if you're still on 11.204. You want some updates on this? Here's Larry's phone number, 742-0601. No, that's the Moz note, right? That if you want to check on the status of any upgrade and how long something's going to be supported for, there's where to go. I think I've made enough of a case to get over to 12.2 at least. And here's the main point. 12c Release 2 is especially mature now. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But a 12CR2 is at least a mature adolescent, someone we feel comfortable giving the car keys to. 18C is that same person coming back after a year away from school at college and has finally realized that in that 1 year, mom and dad actually learned a lot and have gotten a lot smarter. No, actually, the student's gotten smarter. There's a lot more features in here. I'm not going to spend any time on PTFs, polymorphic table functions, but I do have some others to mention. And finally, kind of a look ahead here is 19c, automatic indexing and several other features we'll talk about. But the key thing to realize, I'm not going to spend any time on autonomous database. People ask me, by the way, what's autonomous database? Is it 12c? Is it 18c? Is it 19c? The answer is yes. Or if you prefer, your favorite color is plaid. Because in truth, all three of those feature sets are what underlie autonomous DB. That'll be a discussion for a different day. But today I want to go through some of the reasons to consider at least going to 12CR2. You know, hey, the Apollo program was the height of American space travel to the moon, but you know, it was a pretty mature product by the time it got there. Here's just three key things to realize about PDBs, for example. The first thing to understand is multi-tenancy is not going away. In fact, most new features that are being released, if not all new features, are focused on a CDB, PDB environment. So you're going to be dragged kicking and screaming in 12CR2 into that, but here's some good things. Let's take an idea here of, I've got an on-premises database scenario, right? It's on-premises, not on-premise. That means you're on topic. And I have three PDBs, pricing, retail, and CRM, and someone needs more resources, for example, right? Or I need to take care of the #1 thing that most DBAs spend their time on these days, which is making copies of data for the developers. So I can quickly clone, in this case, to say the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, OCI, the CRM database. And from there, that CRM PDB could be cloned to Dev1, Dev2, and many others for development purposes. And this is done with literally 1 or 2 commands. You can do it with Enterprise Manager. You can even now do it with DBCA, starting in 12CR2, but you can do it just as easily with a few command lines, statements. Here's a really neat feature. It's called PDB Refresh. So I've got my CRM PDB sitting down there in on-premises environment, and as time progresses, obviously data changes. Well, let's say that every 120 minutes, once every 2 hours, I'm going to send those changes up to a different environment. It could be another CDB on premises. It could be the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, right? OCI. It could be another CDB halfway around the world from you, right? That you have as an on-premises environment, but it's got to be 12CR2. What will happen is over time, every 2 hours, that CRM PDB will be refreshed. So let's say maybe even you got a little crazy here and did it every 15 minutes. Maybe that's enough to run your business for people that are constantly doing queries against that data. And finally, this is the coolest feature. This is the one I broke actually with Andy Mendelson in the room when we were testing 12CR2, oh my gosh, it's got to be 3 years ago, PDB Relocate. Here's the way this works. Right now, I've got users running an application against my CRM PDB, and I decide for whatever reason to move to OCI or to, again, another CDB on, say, perhaps Exadata at Clouded Customer. When I issue that command to relocate that PDB, I'm still accepting transactions until I finally say alter pluggable database, CRM, open, read, write. Oracle does two things. A, the database, the PDB that was sitting on premises is no longer recognized as a place to accept transactions, and all transaction volume is immediately rerouted, networking and all, over to the CRM PDB, in this case, in the Oracle Cloud. So again, my point is not that these are great features and where's the code. That's not the point of this discussion, seriously. It's about the fact that these are the features that a mature multi-tenant architecture should have had from the get-go, in my opinion. And starting in 12CR2, we have that. But wait, there's more. If you're running Active Data Guard, and I could make cases for why you should, it's the most robust high availability environment for your Oracle primary database. So if you got a physical standby over in another environment and you're running Active Data Guard, for the first time in history, you can now use database in memory against your Active Data Guard environment. And remember, Active Data Guard essentially depends on redo log transmission, really the transmission of redo over to the physical standby. How many seconds behind your primary are you? Maybe a matter of 10 or 15 seconds in the worst case, depending on network speed. Let's say that you've got a heavy application workload that's mainly data warehousing, and you're running that in a hybrid environment right now against your production OLTP/hybrid environment. Why not ship all that reporting workload over to your Active Data Guard environment? Because that's what you can do. And you can take advantage of database in memory. I know, separately licensed feature. I understand that. But I'd run queries in memory that simply would not finish unless I use database in memory. And in fact, I had one that would never, ever, ever finish. And I'd let it run for over 24 hours. I'd moved its tables into database in memory, and it finished in 3 seconds. That's impressive performance, if you will, from simply throwing a switch. So this is something worth considering. In terms of maturity, here's another thing, partitioning. I'm not going to read through all these points, because I'd be insulting your intelligence. You can read. And we will make these slides available, obviously, after this presentation. But basically, everything that in the past would have required you to take a partitioned table or a part of a partition table, a segment, right, and have to do something with it that used to have to be an offline operation, you can now do in 12CR2 online. The one I really like is split partitions, right? If you have a partition that's got yearly data in it, you need to split it into, say, 4 quarters. In the old days, prior to 12CR2, you had to take that partition offline to make that happen. One other one that I think is pretty neat is the ability to create a table for immediate exchange with a partition table, right? It's the concept of roll-on and roll-off data. And you know as well as I do, if you're a DBA, what happens once data gets inside your database? It never leaves. Well, here'd be a great way to quickly move data out of your database as well as into your database. So everything that you used to have to do in an offline mode with partitioning, you don't have to do it that way anymore. What really enables this, by the way, is the ability to do operations at the table, partition, or subpartition with the alter table move statement. And by the way, now, this is cool, in 12CR2, you can also add the update indexes clauses, and that will take care of local indices, right? If you want to talk about global indices, send me an email. We'll take this offline and I'll get you more details. But in this case, notice I've got 2 indices. One's a primary key for the local index, right? And one is also a foreign key for whatever reason. We've got it perhaps added here. And with the update index clause, those indices remain usable during the move operation. Basically, under the covers, Oracle creates new segments, and then inside the data dictionary, it just goes, boop. That's the sound it makes. And now those new objects, right, are now immediately available. And if you're a DBA and you've had a situation where an index, a crucial index, was missing from a partition environment, and you've seen partition performance go in the virtual toilet, you know how big of a challenge that is. So you don't have to do that anymore. Something that a lot of DBAs don't know about, right? You see a lot of DBAs struggling with this because a lot of their environments, especially if they're in a let's say in a conglomeration environment, right, where they've got some data sources that are offshore, or maybe they've just incorporated a brand new business into their environment. And these guys, nope, it's all Hadoop. They're using high tables. And then you get into this whole discussion of like that old Saturday Night Live commercial. Yes, I'm old enough to remember the first season of Saturday Night Live, where Dan Aykroyd and I think it was Gilda Radner were arguing over whether or not new finish is a floor wax or a dessert topping, and the announcer says, relax you two, it's both. Now you can have new finish. Now you can have your dessert topping and your floor wax in one place. You can point, even in 12.102, at HDFS files, describe them as external tables, or Hive tables, and leverage the metadata inside Hive for partitioning. But wait, that's 12.102. In 12.201, we now have the ability to partition an external table. So imagine you've got maybe 48 quarters worth of data, 12 years worth of data, right? And you've got those sent to you or given to you, right, in external format. Perhaps CSV, perhaps it's Hadoop resident, right? Here's what's really cool. You can simply use partition external tables. Literally looks like a partition table, except for the difference. Instead of saying, here's the table space it lives in, you say, here's the directory and here's the file name. And the beautiful thing about that is partition pruning, not so much partition-wise joins, but partition pruning kicks in. So if you say, hey, I need some data from these 6 quarters, instead of having to go through 48 separate files, only those 6 quarters, their partitions, their physical files would be accessed and incur the PIL. Don't forget about pets when we start talking about a new feature in 19c in a few minutes. Also, as I mentioned, Hive partition external tables can leverage the metadata that's already inside the Hive tables. There's a package called DBMS Hadoop in 12CR2 that lets you essentially copy that metadata from the Hive tables, and now you can take advantage of that Hive metadata as well. So that's a brief intro into 12CR2. Let's talk about 18c, by the way, which is really still 12.2. It's simply 12.203, but with Oracle's new RU and RUR naming and numbering scheme, it essentially comes down to that this is called something slightly different. Space Shuttle, no longer the Saturn V rocket. Pretty reliable, only lost 2. And that was mainly because of human error and ignoring safety checklists. One of the most reliable vehicles, and at its time, by the way, the Space Shuttle was the most complex machine ever built. 160 million parts. What could go wrong? One of the neat features started in 12.102 was database in memory, also known as the in-memory column store. And I mentioned earlier, right, that I had a query that I had from the TPC-DS workload. If I didn't mention that, let me tell you that. I worked with Dominic Giles to build TPC-DS workloads into Swingbench. And I had that query that would never finish. I added it into database in memory. It finished in 3 seconds. Amazing performance difference. Well, here's the good news. In early releases, you, the DBA, had to pick with some assistance. Starting in 12CR2, we got something called the database in memory advisor that would tell us based on SQL workloads which tables or table partitions should probably be in memory. 12CR2 added a new feature that said you can create, say, especially for a partition table, an automatic data optimization or ADO policy, an ILM policy that says, hey, after this partition is 2 days old, put it inside in memory at a priority of high. And after that data is 90 days old and hasn't been touched, then put it at a lower priority, priority medium. And you could even say after 240 days, evict these data, this partition data, if it hasn't been touched in that length of time. 18c now automatically does that work for you. You'll notice that automatically is a big word now in 18c. We talked about briefly autonomous database. So automatic and autonomous, are these things taking jobs away from DBAs? No, no. They're simply relieving tasks that we had that were quite tedious and error prone. We just talked about database in memory being automatic. Here's something that's not 100% automatic yet, but a really neat feature: in-memory external tables. Again, is new finish a floor wax or a dessert topping? Stop fighting, you two. Simply put your data inside an in-memory external table structure. So what that basically means is I can build an external table and load its data directly into database in memory and take advantage of all the analytics advantages that in-memory, database in-memory actually allows. Now here, some tests show performance as much as 100x. At Collaborate last week, I did a presentation on in-memory external tables, and I saw, in a very limited case, only about 25 to 30 million rows, a 20x performance improvement simply by saying, please use in-memory column store. And the reason it wasn't 100x is, I'm going to be honest, folks, I didn't have enough data. I'm now ramping up those tests that's hopefully going to get me into the billion row range, and I'll be able to take a look at and see if I can get into the 50, 75, and 100x range, right? So in-memory external tables, this is something we've never had before until 18c. Here's an example, right? I had a table that was essentially consisting of several flat files, yearly credit data, right, for 350,000 customers. I used my TPC-DS model, and the gray and 2 gold blocks here are actually in memory, or I'm sorry, inside the database, right? And when I loaded them into in-memory, and then loaded my customer credit ratings data into in-memory, I was able to get really excellent throughput. I believe we captured all of those presentations. If anyone's interested in the IMXT presentation, Morgan can get you a copy of that. We've got all of our presentations that we did at Collaborate ready to go if anyone's interested. So this is just one particular use case, but again, it's, hey, quit fighting, you two. Let the data be where it's at, and let's take the best tool we've got, SQL, to analyze the data, right? If you've got developers that already know Oracle SQL and understand at an elementary level, right, how the database works and how SQL works and what to look for, why waste that skill set? 18c also sees an enormous improvement in maturity of multi-tenant. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I do want to talk about the first two, Snapshot Carousel and per PDB Switchover. Snapshot Carousel is a tricky concept to understand. It's so tricky, I had to draw a new drawing for it, okay? I kind of modeled this after Oracle's model, but here's the idea. I've got a pluggable database, PDB prod over here on the far left-hand side. It's my production PDB. I create what's called a test master, a refreshable clone. When I build this, by default, Oracle would create one snapshot clone. I believe the default is at midnight, and it will create a new one every day until 8 days have been satisfied. And as you can see here, I've got the 15th of April through the 22nd of April. What happens on the 23rd? The 15th of April one rolls off. Think of it kind of like a partition table exchange operation. We simply roll off the 15th April version of that, the snapshot clone, and the 23rd April takes its place. So what? Well, here's what. I've got a consistent pluggable database as of midnight by default on each of those days. Can I have more than 8? No. Can I have fewer than 8? Yes. I can only say have 3 or 4 or 7, but I don't need necessarily to have 8. And now what I can do is create a copy from any active snapshot clone. And man, does this happen a lot. I've talked to DBAs all over the world, and one of the typical challenges they run into is the user doesn't want today's data, right? Let's say today is the 19th of April. They want data from the 15th or data from the 16th, right after taxes were processed. But it's the 19th. How would I do that with a snapshot clone? So I can create PDB test one up here in the top right hand, and I can create multiple copies of it. Maybe I want to give 3 different groups of developers or even 3 different groups of analysts access to that data. Oh, and by the way, let's say somebody runs a batch job on the 19th of April, and now it's the 21st of April. And someone comes along and went, we made a mistake. What did you do? Well, we ran the batch job 1.3 times. Oh my God, no, you're kidding me. Yeah, we ran it at midnight, it finished just before midnight, and then somehow at 3 a.m., somebody ran it again, but they caught it. But now we were applying per percentage price changes. And some of the prices, not all of them, some of them were changed. 30% of them were changed. Oh, gosh, what a nightmare. Oh, that's right, I've got a snapshot carousel. I can simply take the snapshot carousel from the 19th and use it as point-in-time recovery, for point-in-time recovery of an existing PDB. Now, a couple things to understand. Using snapshot clause is what actually is used to define an entry in the snapshot carousel. That is different than the snapshot copy clause. Snapshot copies create sparse PDBs. If you want to materialize it, you can, but it can't be. A snapshot copy is not the same thing as an entry in the snapshot carousel. So just be aware there is a difference there. This is an intriguing feature. I'm not sure that I have many customers that are actively using it, but they're certainly interested in it because, again, the different features that are enabled there, especially one of the most bothersome and troublesome things is a DBA having to deal with, I need another copy of the data from last Tuesday. I don't want to deal with that, right? I could make this even available to a junior DBA or maybe even a trusted quality assurance manager. One other cool thing. I now have the ability with the PDB switchover clause to reverse the role between a refreshable clone PDB and a primary PDB. And we talked about refreshable databases, right? Or refreshable PDBs. We now have the ability in 18c to open a formerly refreshable clone as a primary PDB. Now, what's different? In 12CR2, we could actually open it not with the switchover command, but with the failover command, which means that's a one-way trip, right? If you understand switchover versus failover, failover is now this is the primary. Where's the refreshable? Well, no, your original primary PDB does not become the refreshable in 12CR2. Starting in 18c, now it does. There's a couple of restrictions here. You've noticed where it has to be executed from, but that gives me the ability to switch over. It's kind of, I don't want to say poor man's data guard, but in a way, it's a really neat little feature that you can enable in 18c. And we're doing pretty good here. I think we've caught up from my earlier issues with our audiovisual situation. I apologize for that. But let me give you a taste of tomorrow's ice cream. I don't know if any of you saw the SpaceX launch of Falcon Heavy and 3 successful booster recoveries. By the way, quite impressive. It almost looks like it's CGI that's so impressive. By the way, King Neptune recovered the 3rd booster. There was a really rough sea. I don't know if you had heard about that, but the main booster, I think it's called Stage 5, was tipped overseas, unfortunately, and has been relegated to the Deep 6, unfortunately. But SpaceX is to Space Shuttle what the Space Shuttle was to Saturn V, if you will. So here's the coolest feature. Yes, I know if you're a DBA, you're freaking out about no DBA intervention needed. That's not a bad thing. In 19c, for the first time, we can turn over the creation of indexes intelligently at whatever level we choose to the database. The biggest challenge, as DBAs well know, is that data never leaves the database. It tends to stay there, even if it's partitioned. And second biggest problem is indices being created for a brief period of time that have a brief benefit for one query and maybe only one query. And once an index is added, it's very rarely dropped. If we were all genius performance tuners like my colleague, Craig Schellenhamer or Charles Kim or Nitin Vengolakar, right? My colleagues over, not Craig, but those other 2 gentlemen at Viscosity, we would never create an index that we didn't need, and that's completely unrealistic. What's really neat about this new feature is that once we turn it on, by the way, it's not available in all releases yet. It's still available only on Exadata, as I recall right now, and I think only for autonomous transaction processing databases, but I think that's going to expand in the near future. What happens here is AIC, as it's known, will first build an index, unusable and invisible. Essentially, we create it with metadata only, and actually in some earlier releases, you can actually do that and have the optimizer evaluate it. You got to know what to do and some special switches to throw, but it's doable. Then Oracle says, you know, is this index really worth it? Yeah, well, it made that one statement run fast. Yeah, what did it do to the rest of the statements? Well, it made a couple run slower. We will not activate that index. But if we do note that not only the statement that really needed that index took advantage of it and is running faster, and other statements were able to take advantage of it, or at least it had no deleterious effect on other statements, then and only then will it be made visible. We're actually in the middle of testing this right now. Again, I'm working on the 19.2 beta program, and this is the first feature that our team is actually looking at, right, to see how well this actually works. Oracle has some interesting test cases. We're not going to go for their test cases. We're actually not going to use NetSuite. We're actually going to use TPC Echo, the TPC-E standard. Nasty, 31 tables, dozens of transactions, several different complex queries, and we're going to see how well this really works. By the way, you can see what's going on underneath the covers. There's several DBA views and other mechanisms. There's a beautiful report that actually comes out of this that says, here's the indices I found, here's the ones that I thought would work, here's the ones that actually worked, here's the ones that I would like to implement. And by the way, you do have complete control over turning this off or turning it on. So intervention not needed, but certainly it wouldn't hurt to understand how it works. By the way, speaking of performance tuning, yet again, this is what's called real-time SQL tuning, or automated testing of query plans. If you're already using SQL performance, SQL plan management, SPM, as it's called, you know how a SQL plan baseline works. It's basically a SQL profile that's recommended, and then depending on different values for bind variables, right? Imagine a data warehouse, for example, that has an enormous amount of data in it. And you've got a query that either goes after 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 quarters, or 2 years worth of data, right? You're going to end up with different execution plans for each one of those. Well, in the old days, prior to 19c, you would have had to go in and suggest auto promotion of those execution plans. Well, guess what? That's all going to become automated starting in 19c. And Oracle will basically go in, analogous to the SQL plan management example I just gave you, and say, if I move this execution plan in right now, essentially think of it like a SQL plan baseline that's been made active and enabled, right, which essentially turns it on, we'll make sure that it runs no worse than what you have right now. And by the way, if you think about it, both of these features, ATQP, automated testing of query plans, or real-time SQL query, real-time SQL performance evaluation, right? Real-time SQL tuning and automatic indexing, the AIC piece of this was necessary for autonomous database, especially for autonomous transaction processing. Ooh, hope you're sitting down. You probably are. If it's lunchtime or just after lunchtime and you're watching this, this is the coolest thing since sliced bread. This is a 19c feature. I've just started experimenting with this. Yeah, so what? It's just a partition table. Yeah, it's got data from 2003 and then each year, 2004, all the way through 2016. Notice where they're stored, inside a table space. Watch this. I now have a new command, add external partition. Yeah, look at the attributes. Type Oracle Loader. These are going to be comma delimited, in this case, comma delimited, CSV, or pipe delimited or something else. Here's the directory these files live in, and here are the files. Let me stress this. This table, tpcds.hyped, how do you like that acronym? Hyped, HYPT, customer credit ratings, now has two partitions that are actually flat files, comma delimited files. So again, new finish is a floor wax or a dessert topping? Yes, it's both. I can now store data in external and internal formats and access them from one table description. Oh, and by the way, it's going to get better. We talked about IMXT, right? In-memory external tables. Guess what? The in-memory external tables support will now handle Hive and Oracle big data drivers. I think, don't quote me, but in 18c, I believe HDFS support was added, but now the other big data drivers. And by the way, folks, we've got JSON, we've got other file formats that are constantly being evaluated and added to this. So the idea here is, by adding that into in-memory external tables, and I'm guessing at a future date into hybrid partition external tables, right? We will avoid the unnecessary physical I/O of pulling data out of wherever that is, right? Because it could, in theory, for in-memory external tables or for hybrid partition external tables, be in an AWS store or in some other external file store. The physical I/O of pulling that data over is not trivial. And this time, because it's external to my database and to my environment, right, there could be significant PIO costs. So one of the things that's really great about both this enhancement and hybrid partitioned external tables is we essentially say, don't even waste time on pulling over the data from 2017 because we don't care about it. We're comparing the external data from 2018 to the data from 2009. So I don't even need to worry about that. So yeah, this is an incredible enhancement. This one seems almost mind-boggling, but stay with me. For the first time in history, with 19c, we are going to be able to have what's called DML Redirection. So if we have an application pointing at Active Data Guard on physical standby, supported by Active Data Guard, starting in 19c, if we issue a DML command, we will redirect that statement back to the primary. The data changes happen on the primary. The change blocks ship back to the ADG, the Active Data Guard environment. Now that's not that incredible when you really think about it, because since I think 11GR1 or 11GR2, I forget exactly which release, we've been shipping corrupted or block, we've been correcting corrupted block copies across the interconnect, right? Not the interconnect, but the RFS, right? The interface between Active Data Guard, physical standby, and primaries. So in this case, we're simply upping that and saying, no, I can't execute against the Active Data Guard instance, right? But I can ship that request down the pipe back to the primary database. Now that's pretty intriguing. Haven't had a chance to experiment with this yet, but I'm planning on it, right? Because this one could be a real game changer. And one more thing. These things are marvelous, right? They're really great things to be able to do. Where are you going to test them? That's where things get interesting. Because one of the overlooked platforms in which to test this is the Oracle Database Appliance. More on this in just a minute. But for right now, if you haven't seen this lately, remember, number one, this is the same hardware, the X7-2. This is the identical hardware that comprises an Exadata database machine. And this bigger stack here that you see with licensing comes in very equitably priced. That's, by the way, what's called the big flavor, right? You can get an ODA X7-2 in small, medium, more stuff, right? But not redundant or not large, high available, as I like to call it, the high availability stack. That is analogous to having a chunk of hardware that you would have inside an Exadata database machine. And you know as well as I do, licensing for that is not cheap. Here's the cool thing. HCC is now available on the ODA starting in 18c. You do not, as far as I understand, you do not need to have a ZFS storage appliance, right? A ZFS appliance to enable hybrid columnar compression. So what? Hybrid columnar compression can compress data at least 10x. So what? That's 900% less physical I/O that you have to do. It's not about compressing to save space. That's old. It's compressing to do less physical I/O. Some of the tests that my colleagues Charles and Neaton and Rich Nemec have done against the ODA with 18c show some incredible numbers. And by the way, you want bare metal? Great. You want virtualized? Great. This is an actual benchmark that I can share with you. 36K on an ODA HA environment, 36K TPS. IOPS of 2.25 million. 2.25 million IOPS on a dual shelf ODA. I don't have all the statistics here. I believe we have a white paper either coming out or already written on this. But again, no I/O capacity saturation. CPU stayed at no greater than 62% of available capacity for the OLTP workload and 75% for DSS. Again, one slide to show you some of these tests. In other words, this is an impressive little package. And here's the best part. If you're talking to someone from Viscosity, I've just joined the company about a month ago, but these staff are impressive. First off, they're a focused partner. There's only 1 of 4 in the United States, and they're focused specifically on ODA expertise. We have 6 Oracle ACEs on staff. 5 of them are ACE directors. So what? When I say I know Andy Rivenez or I've met Maria Colgan, I mean it. And it's not just that I've talked to them at a seminar. I've had frequent email exchanges on database and memory, on AIC, on ATP. We're a trusted resource for Oracle. And more on this coming up in our May 2nd presentation. We have several referenceable customers who have saved a lot of cash in terms of virtualizing their environments. And if you've been on, say, for example, VMware, and you know how Oracle licenses for VMware, if they're licensing, they have the right to do it any way they want to. You know that that licensing can be between obscure and obtuse. Here, there's some significant advantages for that. By the way, we do have our landing page. You might want to make a note of that on everything ODA. So some of the results that I mentioned here, you might want to check out our landing page and take a look at that. And with that, my friends, I'm done for the day. Back to you, Morgan.
Thanks, Jim. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and grab the screen back. Well, again, Jim, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you kind of bragging on Viscosity a bit as well. Like Jim mentioned, he did just join about a month ago, and we're very excited to have him. He, like he mentioned, is our 5th Oracle ACE director on staff now. So we do have a lot of experts on our team. We're always available for any questions you may have. We will be sharing the PowerPoint slides. If you can email one of the email addresses on your screen, that would be awesome, and we can send those over to you. Okay, so I'll let you guys go for the day, but feel free to email us at hello@viscosityna.com, and we hope that you enjoy the webinar today. Thanks, guys.